The policy of ring fence refers to a strategy employed by the British colonial administration in India during the 19th and early 20th centuries. It aimed to establish and maintain a controlled and segregated space for the British population within India, separate from the indigenous Indian population. The policy was introduced by the British authorities, particularly the British Indian government and the British East India Company. It was executed through the physical and legal segregation of British settlements and neighborhoods from Indian communities. British residents were encouraged to live in designated areas, often fortified with physical barriers such as fences or walls, hence the term ring fence. The intention behind the policy of ring fence was multifaceted. First, it aimed to create a sense of security and exclusivity for the British residents by separating them from the perceived cultural, social, and economic complexities of Indian society. It was driven by a belief in racial superiority and the desire to preserve British identity and lifestyle in a foreign land. Second, the policy aimed to maintain a distinct administrative and social order that reinforced British control over India. By isolating British settlements, the colonial authorities could exercise greater control and impose their own laws, regulations, and customs within these enclaves. Furthermore, the policy of ring fence was also driven by a desire to prevent cultural assimilation or miscegenation between the British and Indian populations. British authorities sought to preserve a perceived racial and cultural purity, emphasizing segregation and limited interaction between the two communities. The execution of the policy varied in different regions of India and over time. In some cities, such as Calcutta, now Kolkata, and Madras, now Chennai, the British settlements were physically demarcated with fences or walls. These areas, known as White Towns, were reserved for British residents and housed government offices, military installations, and other British institutions. Legal and administrative measures were also employed to enforce the ring fence policy. Laws and regulations restricted Indian access to British settlements, such as limiting employment opportunities and imposing curfews. Indian communities were encouraged to reside in separate areas, commonly known as black towns or native quarters, which were often economically marginalized. The policy of ring fence had significant social, cultural, and political implications. It reinforced racial segregation and discrimination, perpetuating a sense of British superiority and reinforcing the colonial power dynamic. It limited social interaction and cultural exchange between the British and Indian populations, hindering the growth of mutual understanding and integration. However, over time, the policy faced criticism for its divisive nature and its adverse impact on the social fabric of Indian society. As the Indian independence movement gained momentum, the policy of ring fence became increasingly untenable, and efforts were made to promote greater integration and equality between the British and Indian communities. In conclusion, the policy of ring fence was a strategy employed by the British colonial administration in India to establish segregated spaces for the British population. It aimed to maintain control, preserve British identity, and prevent cultural assimilation. While it reinforced colonial power dynamics, it also contributed to social division and hindered cultural exchange between the British and Indian populations.